Good evening. I, Dr. Lasagna Flowers, Vice President of the Duncanville ISD Board of Trustees, call this meeting of the Duncanville Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of Board of Trustees is present, that the meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Our mission at Duncanville ISD is to engage, equip, and empower all scholars to achieve their unique potential. We will now move to opening ceremonies. At this time, we'll have our invocation.
Thank you, Dr. Irie. Please join for a word of prayer. Lord, we honor you this evening and dedicate this meeting of minds to you. I pray that you lead us to paths of decisions and discussions that glorify you. In his mighty name I pray, amen.
Amen. Can we stand for the pledges, please? We do not have any communications from the citizens regarding a pending agenda item. We will now move to action item A, an order authorizing issuance of Duncanville Independent School District unlimited tax school building bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $170 million, levying a tax and providing for the security and payment thereof, provided for the award of the sale thereof in accordance with specified parameters, authorizing the execution and delivery of one or more purchase contracts, paying agent registrar agreements, and co-bond cancel engagement letters, approving the preparation of one or more official statements, and approving and enacting other provisions related thereto. Our presenter is Mr. Todd Garrison.
Good evening, Dr. Flowers, Board of Trustees, Ms. Fields. I actually will have Josh McLaughlin is with us, our financial advisor. We'll go over the presentation and the execution of our bond sale.
Good evening, Dr. Flowers, Ms. Fields, members of the board. It's good to see you again. Last time I was here was in December, so now we've caught up a little bit, and we're going to talk about the finance plan tonight. But, as I did last time, I always like to say congratulations. Passing a bond election is a very hard thing here in Texas, and you did so with flying colors, almost 2-1. The other thing I always like to talk about is how the district manages its debt portfolio. Just because the district will go out and sell bonds occasionally doesn't mean it puts its head in its sand and wait for those bonds to mature. You actively manage that portfolio, and this is an example. Either through refinancing your existing bonds at a lower rate or prepaying bonds prior to final maturity, you have reduced taxpayer interest costs by over $61 million since 2005. As you well know, every year, and you're doing a budget workshop tonight, so every year you set 2 different tax rates, your maintenance and operations and your interest and sinking fund. The interest and sinking fund tax rate is used solely to pay voter-approved bonds, which is what we'll talk about tonight. This gives you a 6-year history of your tax rate, but since I'm here, I always like to point out your tax rate's gone down over the last 5 years. Over the last 5 years, you've gone down over 43 cents. That's pretty outstanding. This gives you a look at your current debt portfolio as it stands right now. Currently, you have $167.22 million outstanding. Those bonds are repaid over a 22-year period. You will see your debt service drops over time, which is part of the reason we're able to sell $170 million without increasing the overall INS tax rate very much. Currently, you're rated AA3 by Moody's and AA- by S&P, outstanding ratings. And by virtue of the permanent school fund guarantee, which we've applied for and have received, your bonds will be rated AAA at the time of sale. This is a bond buyer index. It gives you a general indication of what municipal interest rates are doing. As you can see, they are a little bit higher than we were this time last year. That is a reflection, again, of what you hear in the marketplace. Everybody's worried about inflation. Inflation has been relatively sticky, so the Federal Reserve has not yet lowered rates this year. But when we look at this from an historical standpoint, interest rates have been higher more than 55 or almost 55% of the time in the last 20 years. So from an historical standpoint, you're still going to get a very attractive interest rate on these bonds. You know this better than I do. These were the propositions included within the $170 million bond program. One of the things we do is, once you pass the election, we ask the administration to give us a cash flow. And once you got your architect on board and your construction manager on board, they were able to produce a construction cash flow by project. When are these funds going to be spent? Under federal tax law, if you have a reasonable expectation that you can spend 85% of those bond proceeds within 36 months, then you can issue the bonds. Based upon the cash flow, the district is projecting it's going to expend all 100% of the $170 million within the next 36 months. That's why we're here tonight talking about one bond sale versus multiple bond sales. So the goals of the financing plan. First and foremost, the goal is to live with which under what we told voters at the time of the election, which was a tax rate increase of no more than 4.85 cents. I'll skip to the end here in a second, but you're below that. We will come in better what we tell taxpayers. The other one is to make sure we maximize the district's future bond capacity, maintain a repayment period of 30 years or less. All short-term projects get paid over their useful life, meaning we are not financing a computer over 30 years. We're going to finance that over its useful life, typically 3 to 5 years. We want to make sure we incorporate enough flexibility in the plan that you are able to refund or prepay your bonds in the future, eliminating or reducing the interest cost to taxpayers. And then we stay within the state mandated requirements, which means we have to stay within the 50-cent debt test, which is not an issue to you. And we will not issue capital appreciation bonds. Those are zero coupon bonds, and that won't be part of your portfolio. So in terms of the finance plan, this June we would sell or issue all $170 million. After the issuance, you'll have no authorized but unissued debt. Any increase in the tax rate will occur next fiscal year, 24-25. Right now, we've assumed current market rates plus 25 basis points because it is still going to be a couple weeks before we actually get into the marketplace. The bonds are repaid over a 30-year period, but they do have call features on it, so you can refinance those in the future should market conditions allow. You will generate a premium on the bonds for capitalized interest. All that means is we issue capitalized interest to maintain a certain tax rate. Your tax base may not have reached that level to support that tax rate yet, so we do that through capitalized interest. It is only a 2-year period. The district will not, unfortunately, receive state funding assistance from the existing debt allotment or the instructional facilities allotment program, but you will receive additional state aid for homestead exemption, but we only count on that for 1 more year. And the reason we only count on that for 1 more year is there's nothing in statute that says that goes beyond the current biennium. The last few bienniums, they have rolled this over, and we're very hopeful they'll roll it over again. But until they put it in statute, we can't count on it as a long-term funding source. This gives you a look at the district's current tax base. As of 23 to 24, the current year, you are just about $6.5 billion. However, you have now received your certified estimates. We have haircut those estimates because obviously people will go through the ARB process and protest their values. So we've assumed a 93% of your estimate, which is roughly $7 billion. Historically, you've come in better than that, roughly 96, 97%. So we're trying to be a little conservative here. In terms of a value increase, that is roughly $440 million or 6.7% this year. If you look at the last 10 years, on average, you've grown $352 million, roughly 7% year-over-year growth. The last 5 years, $380 million, a little more than 6.5% year-over-year growth. For purposes of this finance plan, we're assuming 2% growth for the next 4 years and remain constant thereafter. The reason we don't grow you for 30 years is we know you have additional needs above and beyond this $170 million, where you'll need to have another bond program. We want future growth to pay for future bonds. This gives you a look at those values. You can see that 2% growth factor. It's roughly $145 million. Again, trying to be conservative. To the extent that your values grow more than anticipated, you could prepay debt and begin saving interest cost and building bond capacity. So this gives you a look. I'm going to start in the center column of the voter information document. At the time of election, you went out for $170 million. We assumed an interest rate of 5.25%. That produced net bond payments of roughly $362 million and an INS tax rate increase of 4.85 cents. Those were financed over a 30-year period, and you can see in the first 5 years you paid off just over $5 million and $22 million in 10 years. Based upon prevailing market conditions, if you were to sell the bonds today, it would be roughly $460. So you are, 0.065% less than we had previously assumed. The increase in your INS tax rate would be roughly 4.05 cents. So you're about 0.8 of 1 penny below what we told taxpayers. In terms of debt service costs, roughly $328.3 million, or almost $34 million below what we told taxpayers at the time of the election. And you could see you're paying off roughly the same amount of debt in the first 5 and 10 years. This is a reading test. Okay, and I'm not going to focus on this, but these are the numbers that substantiate what I just told you. But if you could look to the second to last column in column K, that is your projected future INS tax rate. That is based upon the values in column J. So you could see that starting next year, we're projecting your INS tax rate to go up to 36.05, where it would stay there until 2034, in which case you have a built-in drop in your tax rate. Again, that is to generate some additional bond capacity in the future for future projects. And you have another one in 2045-46. So again, we're not putting bullet payments 30 years out. You're paying off principal and interest every year, and you're not over-leveraging yourself. This gives you a look at your outstanding portfolio upon completion of the bond program. Based upon our estimates, you'll have roughly $257.6 million of debt that is callable prior to final maturity. These are the bonds that you'll potentially refinance in the future. If you look at those first two series, your 2015 bonds, those bonds are callable beginning 2/15 of 2025. Based upon the interest rates on those, you'll probably see me again here in a few months talking about the opportunity to refinance that. We can refinance it within 90 days of that call date, which means we could close a deal in November. So just want to point that out, that this won't be the last time you see me this year. In terms of the parameters order, what we're asking you to adopt tonight is an order which will allow the district's administration to move forward with the bond sales subject to certain parameters. Those parameters are that we can sell no more than what the voters approved, which is $170 million. The interest rate cannot exceed 5.25%. Again, we should come in below 5%. The bonds cannot mature beyond that 30-year period, and we have to get this done in a year. The reality is we're trying to get this done in the next 3 weeks. So unless each and every single one of these parameters can be accomplished, we can't move forward. If we can't move forward, we'll come back to the board for additional direction. This is sort of a timetable. We're here tonight asking you to review the finance plan and adopt the parameters order. We are very hopeful to have everything in place by May 24th to sell the bonds. We have already been to the rating agencies. We already have the PSF in hand. We just have to do a couple more things and we could be done. If we sell, we're looking or targeting the week after Memorial Day, at which time you would receive funds June 18th. Lastly, this is a summary of the finance team. This is a negotiated sale where the district is picking the underwriters to go out and sell bonds on its behalf in the national capital markets at a negotiated rate. You can see yourself there as the issuer. We are the financial advisor at BOK. You have co-bond counsel Bracewell and Weston Associates. Your paying agent is UMB. We went to Moody's and S&P for the bond ratings. And then these are the underwriters that were selected pursuant to an RFI process. So when I was here in December, we talked about going out for an RFP. We actually went out for an RFI, which is just a request for information. We requested such information such as the type of firm they were, whether they were a national or regional firm or a historically underutilized business. We asked if they had a local presence. We asked about their sales force, their capital, what kind of fee they would charge. Based upon that and the size of the financing, it was recommended that the district select 5 firms, and these are the 5 firms. Your senior manager would be Siebert, Williams, and Schenck. That is a historically underutilized business. It has a designation of being not only women-owned, majority-owned, but African-American majority-owned as well. The other hub firm is Estrada Hinojosa, which is Hispanic. J.P. Morgan and Raymond James have offices within the district. And Stevens is another prominent underwriter that bid very low fees when it came to this proposal. So it would be our recommendation to move forward with that underwriting team. We also talked about, when I was here in December, the underwriters putting an ad in the paper to give local residents the opportunity to buy bonds. Once we inform the underwriters, they will start doing that. We would expect an ad to go out next week, early next week, through the district social media for a date just after Memorial Day for an actual bond sale. I know I went through that relatively quickly. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Trustee Fahey?
Thank you for your presentation. I don't understand most of this, but I'm going to ask you questions, and then you'll really know I don't understand some of it. Have we in the past had a co-bond working together? I mean, why do we need 2 this time?
That is a great question. So actually, on your last financing, you actually had a co-bond counsel.
Okay.
In that case, it was West and Associates and McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton. Back when the district started to go out for its bond election and it was engaging legal counsel, the decision was to maintain 2, but switch out McCall for Bracewell.
I mean, you're switching out, or do both of them have to agree on something?
Well, they both, first of all, both are here tonight.
Hello.
They don't have to agree on everything, but having 2 sets of eyes is beneficial. And it's not double the fee. Normally, you would think with 2 firms, it would be 1 + 1 = 2. In this case, it's more like 1 1/4.
So it's a flat fee, not an hourly basis?
So it's based upon the bond proceeds or the principal amount of bonds, the district sells. That is their contract with the district.
Can you give me an estimate of our cost?
I believe collectively, and Rob, tell me if I'm wrong, I think the number we have in there between costs, fees, and everything, collectively is about $240,000 for this bond sale. That sound about right?
Now, is it Bracewell? We've used them. They're the Bracewell-Patterson people, right, that we've used in the past? Is that Bracewell the same that we've used in the past?
You wanna
For
come up
different
here and
things.
answer?
I mean, they've been with us in and out for a while.
So, yes, ma'am, Bracewell, at one time was Bracewell Patterson.
Okay.
That group is no longer the school-only piece of that.
Okay.
Have their own firm. That's now the Thompson and Horton, I think, firm.
Okay.
Friends, but they're not affiliated directly with Bracewell anymore. But, historically they were, and Kelly Frells and his son Jonathan's now with our firm, but yes.
Okay, and this is probably for you. The West and Associates is Royce West, right? Local Royce West? Okay, our
Yes,
Royce.
correct,
Our
yes.
Royce, okay, all right.
Okay.
And I've got another question. It's the BOC. I went on the internet trying to figure out what BOK, what BOK stands for. And of course, came up with something like Bank of Khyber in Palestine. And it's like, no, that's not that. We don't do that country. So is there anything that stands for
BOK, no.
BOK? Okay.
So
BOK,
it's
okay.
essentially our holding company is called BOK Financial Corporation.
Okay.
And it was based in Oklahoma. So really, most people think of us as Bank of Oklahoma, but we go by the acronym BOK Financial Securities.
Okay. And at one time, they were Bank of Arkansas, too. I mean, they,
We have several.
Yeah.
We have Bank of Texas, which is here and local, Bank of Arizona, Missouri, Arkansas, a bunch.
okay, thank you. Those are my questions for that page. Any more?
Trustee Phillips?
Thank you. Okay, were you our financial advisor last year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Been your
Can you
financial-
tell me about the paying agent, who the paying agent is? Is this the same paying agent from last year, or?
No, this is a different paying agent. So historically, the district has used BNY Mellon as its paying agent. BNY Mellon has gone through a reorganization over the last year. It has shifted people out of Dallas to California, but majority of their operations is moving to India. They are the highest costing paying agent that is out there. We went through an unfortunate situation where they couldn't find a district wire. And it was determined at that time that there are other better representatives. For a different client, we had gone out through an RFP process, and I was able to show Mr. Garrison the costs of other potential paying agents out there, and UMB is charging an annual fee per issue of $300, which is $450 less than what Bank of New York was charging, and you get better service.
Okay,
So tonight, on this particular issue, we are setting up UMB, but we will eventually come back to the board and ask to transfer all your issues outstanding from Bank of New York to UMB.
oh, yeah, I do have another question. So UMB Bank, where are they located?
So they actually have an office here in Dallas. They have several offices around the country. I believe their primary office is in Missouri, though. So UMB, I believe, stands for United Missouri Bank.
Okay. Where did Frost Bank fall in this? Wasn't Frost Bank part of this process at one point?
So Frost Bank is a prospective underwriter.
Okay.
They were part of the RFP process, so the RFI. We received 18 responses. Frost was one of them. We did evaluate Frost. They did have a local participation, but when we looked at the fees they proposed, they were outside of some of the other firms like J.P. Morgan and Raymond James, meaning their fees were higher.
Okay, that's it for now.
Trustee Savage Martin?
Just a quick question. The underwriters, you said J.P. Morgan and Raymond James were local. Do they, because I love how you give local residents priority, but communicating through the web, I'm afraid is not going to get them. But do J.P. Morgan and Raymond James get to mail to their?
So it's an electronic communication, so once the ad's available, it's available to all the underwriters. We found the easiest thing to do to reach the district's community is to reach out through the district's social media platform. But all the underwriters will have the ability to have that advertisement, and they can forward it to local clientele should they
Good.
deem it appropriate.
Okay, thanks.
Trustee Colton?
Thank you for your presentation. So would you recap your selection criteria for the underwriters again? I've heard, I guess the process is they have to submit a fee schedule or something like that. Could you explain?
Sure. So back in early April, we sent out, it was either late March or early April, I forget, we sent out basically a 3-page request for information that was limited in size and scope to certain questions. One, the first question was simply, who's the contact person at your firm? Please categorize your firm, whether it's a national, retail, or a hub firm. Give us the size of your sales force. Tell us about the capital that you have, because obviously we don't want someone who's undercapitalized to go out and try to sell the district's bonds. It doesn't work very well. Sales force, whether you had a local presence, and I'm not talking about a presence inside Dallas-Fort Worth, but literally inside the district's boundaries. And then we added rankings to go along with each firm. Every one of the 18 firms that responded are highly qualified. The district could have not gone wrong picking any single one of them. And the last thing was we showed them basically a schedule of the bonds as it was at that point in time and said, all right, show me the commission you want to charge in order to sell these bonds. And then we rank those from high to low.
Are those fees negotiable?
Those are negotiable.
Okay, so Frost was one of our underwriters the last time. I'm trying to understand. I know they have, quite a presence in our community. Could you elaborate more on why they didn't make this list?
Sure. So at the end of the day, we got down to essentially 4 local firms for a few spots. One of which was J.P. Morgan. They bid the lowest fee. The other one was Raymond James. They bid 9th. Stevens bid 3rd. Another local participant is Wells Fargo. They didn't make the list. They bid 11th. And Frost bid 14th. And that was the only reason they're not on the list, is what they were willing to charge the district was outside what everybody else was willing to bid.
Okay, but there was no discussion, and the fees were negotiable. Oh, right?
Fees are negotiable, but in our experience, having done this for 25 years, if you get an RFP and you don't lead with your best foot forward, you're not going to earn the business.
so for the, I guess, was the process similar for BOK?
So we actually went through an RFP with the district back, I believe, in 2014, at which time the district received, I believe, multiple applications to become your financial advisor, and we were selected and have been your financial advisor ever since.
Okay, so 10 years ago.
Mhm.
All right. So I have another question regarding the, I know we're wanting to sell 170 million at one time. Is there an expected expenditure schedule?
Yes, there is. Yes.
Is it available somewhere where we can see it?
I will defer to Ms. Fields and Mr. Garrison, but they were the ones provided to me, so I assume they can provide it to you as well.
Well, I saw a list of the expenditures we anticipate making, but the expected, because we're not going to do all the projects at one time. So I was just wondering about that schedule, if it's available.
Trustee Colton, are you thinking of like a timeline?
Yes.
Okay.
We can do that for you. Some of the things you've already approved, like the buses and some things like that, that's what part of this is.
Yes, ma'am. No,
But we can certainly get you, I don't think, I thought maybe I saw the list with all, did you not just show that with all the list of?
So the cash flow, so we showed just the schedule of projects. But there is a separate schedule that if you unhide the Excel columns, it will go, not necessarily project by project, but school by school, and show when that expenditure is supposed to occur, first date and last date.
yes, that's what I was looking for.
Yes, that'll probably be something we'll be.
We presented some of that, Ms. Coulter, in our bond presentation, but this is just the running list that you have here, but the expectations of when this is going to be done, start, finish. We're still working also with the architects and our Lockwood Anderson and Newman, our project managers, working out our schedule. But we looked at the 170 million because, one, the rates, of course, and then a projection to be finished with this, all the projects in 3 years.
Yes,
So, yes, ma'am.
I have a question, but I'll wait.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Are you done?
Did you say we
Hold on
had-
one second, I'm sorry. Were you done? Okay.
Did you say we had saved $61 million through the years?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now, were you or your firm responsible for that? I mean, were you making the recommendations? I mean, who do we pat on the back?
The district
Okay,
administration.
okay. Well, thank you that we get the
yes.
opportunity to approve, but I really, who do we thank for that?
That
Dr.
is-
Smith?
That is truly the district's administration in combination
Okay,
with your
okay.
financial advisor. So, you know, it is our job as your financial advisor to bring you opportunities when they arise. It is the district's administration to also remind us to bring you
Yeah.
opportunities should they arise. And over the years, we've been fortunate enough. Now, saying that, I was not your financial advisor all the way through 2005. My prior firm was, which was RBC Capital Markets. So, you know, from a longevity standpoint, we know the district very well, but there've been multiple financial advisors over this length of time.
You know, school boards get praised and fussed at for things we didn't have any part of, so I was just wanting to see who we gave the hand clap to, so, but thank you.
No, we were a part of that.
We have to approve, we approve everything. But I'm thinking original idea, whose duty, or, you know I'm too picky, but thank you.
I have a question. Can you go back to the other slide with the Stevens, the list of?
Oops.
Got
There
it.
you go.
Yes. What is our relationship with these 5? Have we worked with the 5 underwriters previously? Can anybody?
Some of them you have. Raymond James has historically been the district senior manager. Estrada was in the last transaction. I don't believe Siebert was. I think this is the first time Lee's been involved with the district. And I will have to go back and look at JP Morgan or Stevens. I know for a fact Stevens was not involved in the last transaction.
Okay. So because they ranked 3rd in their rate, their proposal, that's how they got to the list. And maybe this isn't the forum, I'm just trying to figure out background on Stevens Incorporated.
Their lead banker is a gentleman named Dr. Alfred Ray.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Ivory, I'm sorry, Vice President Flowers, may I speak?
Absolutely.
Okay, I researched some of these names on this list, and I am going on record saying that I'm very uncomfortable with the Stevens Inc. on here because there was a relationship with that person that runs that deal. So I'm going on record that I will not, if this is it, I'm just not comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Can
I'm
you
sorry,
repeat?
what?
I didn't
Yeah,
understand.
Repeat that.
Dr. Ray is Stevens Inc.
So
And I'm just, I mean, with the relationship that was there, I don't agree with that. That's just my opinion. I'm not comfortable with that,
Thank you.
with that background.
So
Thank
if I-
you.
So if I could, these underwriters have not been informed of their selection or not. So if at the pleasure of the board, you want to change one or multiple of the underwriters, there is certainly still time to do so.
I would like to.
So would I. I'm not sure what the process, so we're not voting on these underwriters today.
No, you're simply voting on the order.
Okay, so we'll just, so the record is, we're not voting and approving the 5th underwriter.
May
What's the process for that?
I, may I,
Absolutely.
please? Thank you, Madam Vice President and Board. I do want to just share this. If you all recall, you did give me, I believe, the authority to negotiate this, and so we've done what you've asked us to do. You're not voting on the underwriters tonight. We can go back, so at your request and direction, to go back and take another look at the others. Maybe there's another one that was the next level, so that we want to move forward in the process so that we can get our money, so we can get our projects going. And so we did not do this in haste. I will tell you, I did also some research as well. And without going into a lot of specific details here, but we will certainly go back and work with Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Garrison, and myself to look at the others that, I guess 12, that submitted their RFIs, so that we can bring to you again an additional list. These are the people who will be managing the work. So I wanted to say that, and thank you all. Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. And I totally understand that there's a timeline. And I appreciate you all for all the work that you're doing to keep us on schedule to get this done. But this has to be voted on tonight, right?
The order does.
The order.
We can simply not send this out to the underwriters until the district has an opportunity to meet. I would ask that to be relatively quickly because we are under a timeline. Don't you have a meeting next Monday?
We have a meeting on Monday.
Well, that means you all have to get together pretty quickly then, right?
That's
Not an
no
issue.
problem.
Okay,
That is not a problem.
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Garrison?
Oh, sorry.
senior manager and four co-managers from the hand of 170 if we just strike the one? Or do we need a fifth?
You do not need a fifth. Certainly, the four there are quite capable and can move forward with those four. However, it sounds like there may be some desire to add another local firm back. And so you can name that fifth firm, or you could just approve those four.
I don't believe that's what we were asking for another one. If the four, thank you, Mr. Garrison, if four can manage and we can move forward with the first four underwriters, yes, we were just talking about the fifth one.
Okay.
Trustee Savage Martin.
Yeah. Just one question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm doing it for myself. Is this a good reason? Should we, because he was a former superintendent, is that a reason not to deal with his company? And I didn't know, so I'm glad Cassandra looked that up. I had no idea.
Excellent question. And school districts, not only Duncanville ISD, but across the state, have to answer this on a daily basis, because the vast majority, there is a handful of former superintendents that are active in this business. The most prolific is Dr. Rick Reedy from Frisco ISD, who is involved in virtually every one of Frisco's financings. So the majority of school districts have looked at this and said it's not a conflict of interest, but every community, every school district is different.
Right.
Okay, so it just depends. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Fahey.
And the Stevens Group, they were listed fifth or last on print, but they were really rated number 3. Did you say?
They provided the third lowest bid.
The
So
third
when it
lowest
came,
bids, okay.
So when it came to the co-managers, we just put them in alphabetical order.
And also, when I was trying to do this research on, I was trying to find what BOK was, and I think I said Palestine, but it was Pakistan. Well, I knew that wasn't right. So I can kind of figure out some of those. When I went to Weston Associates, I wanted to find out if it was our signature, and their web stuff's all messed up. I couldn't access. I wanted to. Did you know about it? I'm sure you know your website better than I do, but I couldn't get the information I was looking for. You know, there's all kind of legal matters you're involved in, family and
Sure.
civil and all that.
Yeah, I wanted to know exactly what information on the website were you looking for, so I can kind of.
What bond?
Okay. Well, so in general, it's public finance, but it's more so of an umbrella as opposed to just school districts, cities, and any type of a issuer. But as far as just in the context of just being able to do these types of deals, it's more so on our website as an umbrella to where we do all public finance.
I think you do a lot of everything.
Yeah. Now, I
Yeah.
will say it is a full-service firm,
Yeah.
but we have
Yeah.
a small team, myself and 4 other attorneys, and all we do is public finance and bonds.
Thank you. Are you aware your website's kind of messed up right now?
I'll let the
Okay.
I'll let the office manager know.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank
Do I
you.
have a motion in regards to the order authorizing the issuance of Duncanville Independent School District unlimited tax school building bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $170 million, levying a tax and providing for the security and payment thereof, providing for the award of the sale thereof and accept in accordance with specified parameters, authorizing the execution and delivery of one or more purchase contracts, paying agent registrar agreements, and co-bond counsel engagement letters, approving the preparation of one or more official statements, and approving and enacting other provisions related thereto, as submitted by Todd Garrison, Chief Financial Officer, and as recommended by Andre Fields, Interim Superintendent of Schools.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion? We now move to information and discussion items, demographic report. Dr. Halashka.
Good evening, Madam Vice President, trustees, and Ms. Fields. I am happy to share with you introduce to you this evening, Mr. Bob Templeton. He is here with Zonda Education. He's been a longtime partner with the district and is going to share with you our demographic report. Zonda Education also did a report for us on their reconfiguration. That has also been added to your board book this evening for informational purposes. But Mr. Templeton is here just to talk about the demographic report this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Flowers, board members, Ms. Fields. It is my pleasure to be with you tonight. And I'll start with kind of the big picture with demographics. This is a new report that we've started including, which kind of gives you some high-level overall demographic look. You'll notice that the total population within the district, if we count everybody that lives in the district, is about 75,910 persons. And then we've got a bar graph that shows the breakdown of that population by age cohort. The things that really jump out there is you're relatively young, in that your largest group is the 25 to 29 group. That's your largest population. The second largest is that 15 to 19, 30 to 34, so definitely overall fairly young. When we look at those breakdown by generation terms, you'll notice that it's the millennials, which in the Gen Z. So those are basically your 20 to 40-year-olds that are in that group. So some of those are your young parents. The alpha generation is about a half a generation, so it's still got several years to grow before it reaches its full size. But overall, I would say relatively young. The median age is 34.4. Total number of businesses within the district is about 2,311. You can see the breakdown on the education attainment and average hours of commute. Kind of interesting in that average commuters are spending about 7 hours a week to and from work. That's definitely going down now because we are seeing more that are able to take advantage of some flex time, not having to go into the office as often as they used to. I wanted to touch on the economic conditions. We use the unemployment rates to kind of give us the overall feel for the economic conditions. You'll notice the big spike that happened in March of 2020, the pandemic, and then you'll notice it improved pretty quickly. As of the end of the year in 23, the unemployment rate was right at that 4% range, which is basically fully employed. And it means we're still struggling to fill some of the service positions. It's typically hard in education around the food service, transportation, grounds, even substitute teaching positions can be rather hard to fill. But we are seeing a little bit of a stabilizing, and we're not seeing as much turnover in the labor market. When we look at total home sales in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, this is total new home sales. Dallas-Fort Worth is still the #1 city in the country for new home sales. We're building about 43,000 single-family homes per year. Definitely the rising interest rates have had an impact. You can see that big drop from 2021 to 2022 in the sales rate of new homes, but it has picked back up over the last 2 quarters. Now, this is kind of a thematic map to show you where the biggest population growth is happening in the DFW Metroplex. Those red areas are where we're seeing the most construction, so that's where the most population growth is. It's kind of got Duncanville surrounded a little bit. You can see definitely growth is happening. It's still happening in Duncanville, but it is slowed just a tad because of the rising interest rates. On the multifamily side, these are some of the lowest occupancy rates that we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years. The occupancy rates across the DFW Metroplex are just a tad bit over 88%. They like it to be in that 92, 93% range. The reason the occupancy rates are so low is because we've built so many apartments. So a tremendous amount of multifamily apartments have been built over the last year. Total number of apartments built in DFW right at 32,000. Now, I wanted to jump to, we track the new home activity by quarter. You can see we've started 38 homes new homes in the district through the first 3 quarters of 2023. I suspect that number is going to end up being in around the 50, 55 range when we get to the full count for 2023. When we look at total home sales, this does include existing homes and new homes. Again, you can see the impact of the rising interest rates. Now keep in mind, in 2020, the first part of 2021, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage was at 3%. Those were historic lows, and then the Fed did a systematic approach to raising the interest rates to help try to fight the inflationary changes, and that's what's resulted in the drop in total sales within the district. People are staying in their houses longer because they want to keep that low interest rate. They don't want to sell and move to a different home, so therefore they're staying longer. Now, the average pricing of new homes and existing homes has not softened yet. So we're still seeing the average price for a new home in Duncanville ISD is over $319,000. The average price for an existing home to sell is $479,000. Again, it has to do with supply and demand. The demand is still really strong. We still have lots of people moving into the area, and the housing supply is low, so therefore the pricing is staying up. Again, looking at where the most activity is taking place, the Alexander zone is seeing the most single-family homes being built. 38 is the annual start rate. 229 is the number of vacant developed lots available for builders to build on. 734 is the number of future lots that are in the planning stages. We've got a fairly high concentration of future lots in the Hyman zone, 251, and Bill Hart's has about 116 future lots. Plus, there is still some remaining vacant land, so I do think we could still see some infill of some additional single-family and some multifamily. So you're not done building yet. It's just going to likely stay at a little bit lower pace. This is the map of your elementary attendance zones. Those green shaded areas are the active zones where we're seeing some single-family construction. The yellow zones are the future developments that are in the planning stages. We've got 6 actively building subdivisions. We have 7 future subdivisions. We have groundwork underway on 126 lots. I'll touch on some of the highlights. This is the Ridge at Daniel Farm. It's a future development that is about 93 future lots. It hasn't started yet, but it is getting close to starting. The homestead at Daniel Farms, it is active. You can see the satellite image from March of 23 compared to the satellite image of December. So there have been some significant numbers of new homes that have been built in the homestead at Daniel Farms. The yield of students per house is 0.464 students per home. They're estimating they could be building about 40 to 60 homes per year. This is in the Bill Hart's Elementary Zone, Grady Niblo development, which is 90 future lots. It is a small home type development that's by the Caseta builder, and so it has not started yet. It's just in the north of that section behind some multifamily, near some single family as well, in the Bill Hart's zone. This is an active development. This is 10 Mile Creek, 367 total lots, 11 homes under construction. You can see in the southern part of that neighborhood, they still have 69 vacant developed lots. On the multifamily side, we've got a couple of multifamily projects we're tracking. There is the Jefferson Cedar Ridge. It is under construction. It's about 360 total units, and that yield is ranging between 0.125 and 0.175, which roughly represents about 45 to 65 future students. It's almost done. And then we've got a future development, which is the Cedar Lake Apartments, anticipated yield to be between 0.105 and 0.155 students per unit, based on their bedroom mix in Cedar Lake Apartments. We've got 360 apartments under construction, and 196 were completed this past fall, and we've got an additional 152 units that are in the planning stages. Now, I wanted to give you some background on your current existing apartments. So those blue shaded areas are your apartment buildings within the district. You can see I've got a bar graph that's showing you the numbers and the year built of those apartment buildings. I've also got a table that shows the yield of students per apartment. You can see those apartments in the Hastings zone. That's some of your highest yielding apartments that are yielding 0.62 students per unit. And then the apartments in the Acton Elementary zone are yielding yielding 0.566 students per unit. And then in the Smith zone, 0.391. Overall, we've got about 2,307 students residing in roughly 7,906 apartment units. Now, I wanted to touch just on your enrollment for the last several years. This is a table tracking enrollment for the last 5 years. The yellow cell is the largest grade per year. The green cell is the second largest grade per year. You'll notice that your secondary classes are much larger than your elementary classes. That is the overriding problem with why your enrollment is declining. It's not so much that students are leaving, it's just that because the birth rates are low and the incoming classes are smaller, there's also more charter competition that takes place at the elementary levels, and we see some of those return back to the district in middle school because of your strong fine arts and athletics. There's some of the charter families, it's about convenience at elementary, but then when it's time for the secondary experience, charters can't compete. So then they come back, which is why we've got this consistently big classes in ninth grade and high school. Now, the table at the bottom there is showing you the grade level change. So that's where you can look across that gold bar at the bottom, and that kindergarten number is 1.029. That basically means your kindergarten class grew 3% this year. So anytime you see a positive number above 1, that means that grade actually grew from the previous year. So you can see this year's 5th grade class dropped a little, but just about every other class grew. But the problem is, because we've got that big number in 12th compared to the small coming in, that's why the enrollment dropped 181 kids this year. And that's why when we go forward for a few more years, we're still going to be seeing enrollment drop just because of the bubble that's exiting is larger than the bubble coming in. Any questions here? Okay. Now, one of the things we're starting to look at is, because we're using some of the census data, we're able to look at the school-aged population within your district. So this is based on census data. So that 5 to 9 is from the census and from the American Community Survey. So you can see in 2010, that was 5,578. You can see the 10 to 14 number, the 15 to 18 number. We add that together, and then we compare it to your enrollment, so we can see what your capture rate is of the students that are attending versus the number that's living in the district. In 2010, your capture rate was 82.3. In 2020, it dropped to 70.6. Now, during that time, there was the expansion of charters, but also the pandemic. So that pandemic did cause a little bit of a drop, and we've seen that drop in every district that we've done this for. So that drop is not specific to Duncanville. It happened everywhere. Now, we'll give it a second to come back up here. And now you saw it bounce back a little bit in 2023. So in 2023, it bounced back up. So the delta between that 77.4 and 100% is charters and homeschool. Mm-hmm. That's what causes that difference. Now, there is a little room that you can get some of those back. This year, we did see an improvement in the number of students that are transferring out of the district. That number went down, which is good. The net improvement was about 165 kids to the positive. It's still negative, but it's not as negative as it was a year ago. So that's a good sign that you're kind of moving in the right direction. A lot of districts, they're moving the other way. When I say moving the other way, each year they're transferring out more and more. Your transfer out number went down this year. Now, the thing is, when we created this report, we didn't have this year's numbers, but I do have them because I was able to look at it before I came this evening. The transfer in number is about 1,053. So it went down just a little bit. You want this number to keep going up, but it went down just a little bit. But this number, this is the number last year. The transfer out was 4,125. This year, the transfer out is 3,944. That's where I was referring to. That's where it improved because you have less kids transferring out than you did last year. So this is an area that, you know, it's the charters, it's surrounding school district. I kind of highlighted the big numbers. So you can see there's about 553 that transferred to Dallas ISD, 380 to Harmony, 221 to Newman International, 410 to UME Preparatory Academies, 484 to Village Tech. But it's primarily the charters where we're seeing the biggest. And there again, this is happening in Grand Prairie, Lancaster, it's happening in HEB, it's happening in virtually every district in Dallas County and in Tarrant County. Birth rates, I'm touched on birth rates. Birth rates are a challenge in that we are seeing nationally a reduction in the birth rates. Kids are waiting to marry, they're waiting to have kids. Those are in some ways good things, but in the end it causes less students or less kids per family. I'm seeing it in mine, and it's definitely a global trend. We use the birth rates to guide our kindergarten projections. So you can see, you know, we're kind of holding that kindergarten number at about 600 to 614 students over the next 3 years. I do expect your number could soften down to about 10,900. Then there's the potential for it to come back up. That's the exiting of the bubble, and then hopefully some larger classes coming back in. I always encourage our districts to really focus in on the 5 and kind of plan around the 5-year number, and then we'll see what happens and changes in the economic conditions. If the interest rates drop, I think they'll drop in 2025. I think they'll get in that 5% range. I don't think they're going to get back down to the 4s, but they could get a little lower, which then might make it a little easier for some of those first-time home buyers and younger home buyers. Here's what it looks like at the campus level. Again, you can see we got a little bit of an elementary drop over the next couple of years. The intermediates could settle in at about 1,100, almost 1,200 students, so it's about 100 or so down from where it is now. So staying in that 300 to 400 at the elementary level. You can see a little bit of growth in the Alexander zone. You know, it's about 343, could get to over 400 students in 9 or so years. A little bit of growth in the Alexander, and the other elementaries could see a little bit of growth. At the intermediates, again in that 300 to 400 range, with Hardin Intermediate as the largest at just approaching 500 in about 4 to 5 years. At the middle school and high school you can see your two, Byrd and Reed, are just under 500, whereas Kennemer is the largest of the middle schools. And your high school could start to trail down as the bubble exits, the big bubble in those current large class sizes. We'll see how much I am building in some of that charter return into the high school numbers. So I did take some of that into consideration. I'll do key takeaways and be ready to answer some additional questions. Duncanville's enrollment did go down by about 181 students this year. The higher interest rates are having an impact on overall home sales. We are seeing some development. We do have future lots. We do have 126 lots that are in development. We've got 2 multifamily developments that are in the process of being built, and there's about 550 new multifamily units in the district. The district, I anticipate you're going to get to about 10.9 in 5 years. Maybe we could bounce back to about 11.3, almost 11.4 in 10 years, which still is a couple of hundred students less than where we are right now. Well, that was a lot. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great information.
Trustee Fahey?
Yes, sir, thank you. I just happened to dig out one of your demographic updates.
From last year?
In 2019, 2020, and you were off just about 600. You had predicted more students. And do you think that was the COVID was the reason? Okay.
Definitely COVID.
That's what
For sure, 100% COVID. And this
students.
is, like I said, I'm fascinated by trends. And the pandemic, when the pandemic first started, school districts did an amazing job with transitioning, going home, meals, and we were getting great news, and I was so charged about what I was seeing in the news. Behind the scenes, what's happening is parents were getting a taste of kids at home during the day, and the technologies advanced at such a rate. The resources available to them. Also, there was more opportunities for remote work. So this remote work timed with these families with kids at home, and some of them went, you know what, this is doable. And it's mostly at the elementary, and that's what we're seeing across the state. It was the elementary grade levels that really, we didn't see them come back as quick, and now that's the group that I know is highest in the homeschool world because it's a little easier in the content, but when the content gets up into the middle school grades, it gets a little more challenging, and that's when we're going to see them come back. But that was the pandemic on the difference between the 2019 to what it is now. You're welcome.
Any additional questions? Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will turn the meeting over to Andre Fields.
Again, thank you, Board. Tonight, of course, this is our second budget workshop, and we just kind of want to update you on where we are, the work that we've been doing. You'll hear a little bit from me. You'll hear from Mr. Garrison on our financial report, our revenue, our expenditures, et cetera. And then you'll hear from Ms. Brown again a little bit more about where we are with the staffing plans and other things that we've been working on. And we thank you for what you've done, the feedback that you've given. One, you gave feedback last time you wanted the demographic study, and so we brought that to you tonight. And so we hope that this will be beneficial. The only other thing I will say before we get to the district priorities, which is on the next slide, is that we are crafting a framework of the budget. There are so many unknown factors in regard to this budget. It's probably the most uncomfortable, most challenging time to bring a proposed budget. But we do thank you. Thank you for the feedback that you've given. I know you've been watching the news and seeing what's happening across the state in regard to what districts are having to do. And we have, as we've said before, some tough decisions to make. You've already approved the compensation plan and on last month, and so this month we want to present for you before the final budget is approved and the tax rate is set in June. We want to give you an opportunity now to dig in a little bit further. We have more specific details in regard to our revenue, so Mr. Garrison is going to present those. If you'll advance to the next slide. Of course, I believe last time I may not have highlighted the district priorities that we set in August for this school year. The priorities align with our strategic plan, but we teased out 4 main areas that we wanted to focus on this year. And again, we had a retreat and we worked together. These are the 4 priorities, and we've been talking about them throughout the school year. So first, of course, is student academic performance, which is always our top priority. In order for us to have that, we have to recruit, equip, and retain high-quality staff. And you even heard Mr. Templeton talk about the challenges with staffing in general, and you all are well aware of that, but we're continuing to work toward retaining and equipping and recruiting high-quality staff for our students. A balanced budget. And that's one of the reasons we're here tonight, to talk about that and where we are and the true picture of where we are. And then our bond election and post-election actions, and you've already approved tonight for us to move forward with the sale, and I thank you very, very much for that, so we can continue moving forward on our timeline. So with that, we're going to now turn it over to Mr. Garrison, who will begin our presentation. And Board, we tried to be cognizant of a request you had to number the pages, so hopefully you have the pages, so if you have to go back and ask, for the numbers of the pages so that you can go back for that. And so you can advance to the next slide.
Well, good evening again. Vice President Flowers, the board, and Ms. Fields, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss and give an update on where we are in our budget process. We will have a lot more information, a lot more detailed information, and as accurate as it can be with the projections that we have at the time. So we'll talk a little bit about the same process as the budget process, enrollment and projections, current tax rate, projected budget amounts, and then some efficiencies. This is a slide, again, that we're all familiar with. We've seen this since, I think, started this in January through this process, and we are now down to the bottom row. We've looked at the preliminary budget with the superintendent and with our group, and that's part of what we're going to present tonight is a little more detailed budget for the board for your feedback so that we can get some additional information before we move to budget adoption in June. And so we'll jump right in, and this actually ties really well into having the demographer here as well as our financial advisor, because this slide, they're involved in both of these and use both of these numbers. I've left 23-24, the funding enrollment up there. Our funding enrollment last year was 10,477, and the funding enrollment is different than our actual enrollment because we don't get some funding. There's different funding for especially our early childhood and our pre-K. We get a little bit less money for those students than we do for the others. So that's why the difference in the number. And we use the demographer's report. We use our current enrollment as well as our roll-up. So when the demographer was talking about how they move up grade levels, we use all three of those. We work with student services to come up with an average of that, what we feel comfortable to come up with. And then we used a 92% attendance rate for this current year. We've been pretty consistently at 91, and so that's one of the recommendations that I have. So with the demographer's report and the average of where we're at with our funding enrollment, we're looking at a difference of about 117 students less this year in our funding enrollment, based on our ADA at 91%. So again, we talked about that at the last meeting. That's going to translate to close to $1 million in loss in revenue just with the students there. That's obviously a key indicator in our revenue projections. Another key indicator are our certified values, the property values within our district boundaries. The number there, that's $6.4 billion, that is last year's certified value as of July 25th. That's when the values get certified. We get our preliminary estimates in April, and that's what that $7.5 billion is. And I'm going to refer back to what Josh had talked about, that seems like a very large number. That's a big jump. And so the number below it is 7.2, where Josh was talking about being more conservative, projecting out for our bond payments. We do the same thing. So between April and July, we typically see about a 3% drop in that number, and that represents the appeals, the people the homeowners that appeal their values and bring those values back down. So we see a drop of about 3%. I went ahead and used 4 because I feel like that was a pretty aggressive number that they put in place. So we won't have that number until July, but this is what we use. We use these two key indicators in the template to generate our revenue estimates. And so that feeds into our tax rate. And so we're familiar with our current tax rate of just over $1.08. That's a combination of our maintenance and operation tax rate as well as our INS rate. And again, as Josh said, the INS rate only generates dollars to pay back our voter-approved bonds. We knew that was going to go up, and again, I can tie back into what Josh has said, that we promised our voters it wouldn't be more than 4.85 cents. It actually came in at just over 4 cents, and so that's been even though that's an increase, it's less than what we had hoped or what we had promised, and so I feel like that's a great indicator for us. Now, our the M&O tax rate is actually set by TEA. TEA uses the certified values to get that number. We don't have certified values until July 25th, and so again, that's why those asterisks are up there. These are estimates, and we won't adopt our tax rate, and typically we do that in September. Even though we adopt our budget in June, we'll get our certified values in July, and then we'll adopt a tax rate to support that, because we don't get that from TEA until typically August. I will say I feel more confident in that number just because our values have grown so much, we're going to get the lowest tax rate by the state. They give a window, they give a floor and a ceiling. Your tax rate can't be below a certain level, and it can't be above a certain level. And that's what the compression each year. And they take the values all through the state and see how much that's grown to determine that window or that opening of what those tax rates are going to be. Because of the huge increase in our values, I feel very confident we're going to hit the floor on that. And with that, it would drop our tax rate another almost just under 2 cents. And so when you combine that, we're looking at a tax rate, I feel pretty comfortable that that's going to be real close, is $1.10, 1.1057. And so it's an overall tax increase of just over 2 cents with adding $170 million in bonds to our books. So that's a real win, and I feel like that's a real win for our taxpayers in the district. So now that we've talked about the indicators, we've talked about the values, we've talked about the attendance, and we've talked about tax rate, what does this look like as far as generating dollars for our district? Again, we've got budgeted amounts for 23-24 with the percentages on there. We were looking at right at 127.4 million. I think that we're going to be under that. I don't think we'll collect all of that. It'll be close, but I don't think we'll get all of that. Especially in the federal. You can see there on that change, I think that we're going to under-collect. We have less federal revenue coming in because of SHARs, as well as there was some money budgeted for some refunds from the federal government on some of our CFR and ECF reimbursement programs that are not in there anymore. So we're not going to receive those funds, even though they were budgeted. So that's going to affect our revenue collections not only this year, but also next year. Now, one of the things that will help offset that is, as Josh mentioned, interest rates have come up and we have good money in the bank, so we will over-collect on the interest side. So that'll counteract that a little bit. So it'll be close, but I don't think we'll get to that 127.4. So for next year, you can see those percentages just flip. Now, you'll also see this on Monday night. I've got a budget amendment in there for Monday, and it is directly related to our tax rate dropping and the homestead exemption going to $100,000. When that happened, we're going to collect less local revenue. When that local revenue gets dropped, we get more money from the state. And so you can see that indicated there on those percentages. They just flip, and it's almost the same figure. It's not one for one, but it's pretty close. And so that's, for right now, we're looking at about $124 million in collections. The large part of that difference is what we're not going to get in the federal. Has very little to do with the state and local revenues. And then we'll go on to our projected general fund expenditures. Now, again, one of the things I want to point out is the 23-24 reflects revised budgets. This wasn't the adopted or original budget. This is the revised budget. And one of the things that I want to point out specifically is the huge change on the payroll side. Because we have, as you know, we have several vacancies. We have many vacancies within the district that we've not been able to fill. And when those positions haven't been able to fill, we've moved some of those payroll dollars into contracted services and supplies and equipment to help offset the staff that we're not able to have in place. So it's about $4.5 million that we've probably transferred down from payroll into those other things. So that skews that a little bit when we're looking at adopting. And so that does have an effect on the change. So I just want to be cognizant of that. So I'm going to start not with the payroll. I'm going to move down to the contracted services and materials and supplies. Because again, it looks like we're saving money. We've got less money budgeted in those than what we had in the previous years, but that's because, again, we've moved money into those. We've actually increased those categories this year compared to the beginning budget last year, but it's because of that transfer of those funds. The main increase we're going to see in that budgeted amount in the payroll is going to be, we're adding the $6.5 million that we've talked about in ESSER, that we've been paying ESSER raises and payroll out of ESSER, moving that piece into the payroll, because ESSER's going away. So that piece is coming in. And then you'll see on the next slide that we've talked about the equity adjustments that were adopted at the last board meeting. That's going to be about $1.8 million. So $1.8 million plus the $6.5 going into payroll. And then we also talked about moving out that we budget for benefits for every employee. We have about 1,800 employees. About 1,100 to 1,200 of those employees take the benefits. So that gives us a cushion of about 600 people that don't. It's about $4,000 a person. So it's going to come out to about $2.7 million in reduction out of that. That's where we come to that figure. Now, I will tell you, though, there's asterisks up there, and the asterisks are because not only is that our biggest chunk of our budget, right now it's the most volatile part of our expenditure budget because, as you know, we're in the middle of staffing season. We're trying to hire. We have vacancies. We have people that may be resigning or retiring. And so there's just a lot of movement in that category until we get through the next month. So that's a moving target. That's the one we'll see move the most, but those are the factors that are in place. So with that said, the difference between that 132 and the 140 million comes out to just over $7 million increase from last year to this year, again, largely due to ESSER funds, payroll things that have come into the budget. And yes, we have increased some of the contracted services, and we can talk about that on this page. This gives a little more of a breakdown of the things that have increased in the budget, and specifically increased in the budget line codes. We've increased the fuel budget by $200,000. Insurance went up about 15%, which that is incredible. It sounds like a lot, but I'm so grateful for that. I think last year it was about 18%, and most districts were seeing closer to 30%. And so for us, I was shocked when I saw 15% and very grateful. So it's about a $300,000 impact to our insurance budget. Utilities, this is water, gas, electric. This is all utilities across the board. Those have gone up, and the budget needed to be increased in that category as well to about $200,000. The next ones are subs, overtime, and extra duty, about $500,000 each in those categories that we're spending more and more in those categories than what we have allocated in the budget. Not necessarily an increase, because some of this can be moved from another, like a payroll line code, down to that. So it's not necessarily a budget impact, but we're increasing those line codes because there's not enough money in those expenditures. So a good example would be, we have $2.7 million in those benefits, in those health insurance benefits. Those are budgeted in a payroll line code. So in the past, if those sub-budgets or overtime budgets, that covered those. We could move that within that function to cover those. But because we're moving those benefits out now, we have to be more cognizant and more cautious and more specific in our budgeting for those overages in overtime, extra duty, payroll, those kinds of, subs, those kinds of things. So that's one of the reasons those have been increased, specifically because we've moved that cushion out of that insurance piece. Of course, the equity adjustment at $1.8 million, and you'll get more details on that from Ms. Brown at her point of the presentation. And then we talked, one of the other questions at the last meeting was, what was the impact of the budget reductions for the departments as well as the campus? The campus, 5%, roughly 5%, saved about $100,000. The department budget's a little more complicated. So we cut the department budgets by 10%. Most all of the departments were able to do that and were able to accomplish that. And that was to the tune of about $665,000 in reductions of most of those, except for the handful there mentioned. And I'm not picking on those because they were items that they needed. Advanced academics, for example, I think it was about $135,000, $140,000 that comes out of their budget but gets moved into that later on in the year. It just needs to be budgeted there, and it's a Dallas College payment. It's that bill, and so again, it gets moved down there. So that just got moved into their budget. It made it look like their budget grows, but it's the budget it's paid out of, and it wasn't in there. Same thing with athletics. The biggest portion of athletics that got increased, because they did comply as well. They cut 10% of a lot of their budgets, but their extra duty for gate workers, game security, those kinds of things, travel, those were things that were hidden in their budget that were going over. It wasn't for like sport specifics or uniforms or something along those lines. So it was about a $200,000, $180,000 increase in those. Maintenance and transportation, some of that is duplicative. So overtime, fuel, those, I've got them listed up there, but those were things that increased in those categories, as well as the transportation GPS software system. A portion of that was paid out of federal funds that we don't have enough money in the federal funds to cover, that's now moved over. The badge and ID system, some of the printers and those kinds of things, they're very expensive, have been moved into that budget. So it was a tremendous increase to that budget that they didn't really have any control over. So I'm going to come back to the ESSER funds just and our fund balance to talk just a little bit. I know you've seen this slide and are familiar with it, but we do have a healthy fund balance of over $64 million. An update on our ESSER funds, we had about 9.7 left. 7.7 of that was payroll. Broken down, that was $1.2 million in specific positions, $6.5 million in just overall raises that we've given that's been paid out of there. The 1.2, we've been able to, that we have about 10 or 11 positions, 12 positions that we've been able to account for and move back into the general fund into vacant positions. So it's not going to have we're not going to have those budget savings, but it's not going to be a budget impact. That's why we only added in the 6.5 back into the payroll side of the budget. We have some curriculum items that are left to spend out of there, and then that $1 million will be drawn down in indirect cost and just come in as revenue into our general fund, which will also help us meet our goal of the 124.5 in revenue. So at the end of the day, when you tie all this out and you get all these moving parts in place, we're looking at about $124 million in revenue and about $140 million in expenses, to the tune of about $16 million in a deficit budget, which really, since we've talked about this since January, we've talked about a minimum of 15.2. When we were talking about the 15.2, we were talking about the ESSER cliff, we were talking about the loss of enrollment, and we said that there'd probably be some additional expenses, and that's exactly where we are, is $16 million. Again, I'll tell you, I want to reiterate, I feel like that this is a pretty good projection with the information we have. Don't be surprised when we get here in June that number flexes a little bit. I don't expect it to be 26 million. I don't expect it to be balanced, but it'll be real close to this. And then the next slide is actually Mrs. Fields. So this is my portion. I'm happy to answer any questions or give any more details that I can if you have questions.
Questions or feedback, board? Any direction in this particular portion? Questions?
I like the proposed changes that you made. It makes more sense. I don't know, that's how I think on it. So that helped me quite a bit.
Thank you.
None.
No? All right. Thank you. Next slide. I wanted to insert myself in this particular portion because Mr. Garrison has, of course, shared and given you a picture of where we are. As I said in my opening comments, it would give me and probably you greater comfort maybe that we know that many school districts across the state are having these same conversations, having these same type of meetings, talking with their staff, giving direction, and you know some of the decisions that many districts and boards have had to make in regards to their budgets. So we've talked about closing schools, consolidating schools, riffing staff, etc. And I ask the team, as we've been planning tonight, to be able to just reiterate how did we get here? And I want to say this, and I want to be on record. No one has done anything nefarious, illegal, any of that. It is the picture that we have because of decisions that we've made as a district. And so I asked them to put these talking points here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Brown. Of course, board, you've been very generous. You've taken care of people over process. You've taken care of our staff, and you've taken care of them well over the last several years, and for that we are grateful. But every time we pass on a raise, an adjustment, of course, it costs. And as you're well aware, even your household budget, things cost more than they did before. And so we thank you for that, but that's one of the reasons and why we're here. Contracted services due to vacancies, Mr. Garrison shared with you, of course, a lot of this is just, deals with making sure we have qualified people to serve our students. A big portion of this, not all, or when we don't have speech language pathologists, when we don't have LSSPs for our special education students, when we have to have contracted services to transport our homeless students. That costs money, and it can no longer be on the money that we receive for Title I. All of those services that we provide to make sure our students have instruction costs money. And we've had many vacancies where we've had to replace with an actual contracted service teacher. If we hire a regular teacher versus a contracted service teacher, of course, the pay is high because they're going to get a fee and all of that. So that's another big part of the contracted services. Whatever we had in our budget for salaries, we've had to add to it to have contracted service individuals teach and serve our students. As you've already heard, I won't dwell on this, our enrollment decline, our attendance rate. We shot for 92% last year when you approved the budget. We've been hovering right at 91, and so that 1 point, as he's already said, is $1 million. Those students, $1 million in revenue. Increased staff per student ratio, and I think we've all visited about that, and I will tell you I am committed. Even as we move forward in this next school year, we are working on this every single day as people are leaving. The staff, and of course just looking at the numbers of student to staff, even teacher to staff, and then staff to students. Our enrollment going down, but we still have the same amount of staff members that we have had for the last 2 or 3 years, and so we're working to reduce that. I'm committed to that, and I think our administration is as well. I put unintended consequences of winning. It's fun to win. It's fun to be the city of champions. It's fun to have our students travel and represent us on the fields, on the courts, in the orchestra, the band, all of those things. But guess what? Winning cost. And so in the budget, as we looked, there are some unintended consequences. The further we go into playoffs, the more it costs. And so I want to insert that because there are some unintended consequences, all the excitement and all of that, but travel costs, all of those hotels costs, meals costs, and that's just not the students. It's the staff that supports them, et cetera. So being good comes with being great, I should say, comes with unintended consequences. And I know as a board, you all, when our students have the opportunity to represent us, you want us to be able to support them. So that's another thing. Of course, travel costs, everything's gone up. Hotels, meals, gas, fuel, even though we have a government rate that we have to apply. But the more we go, the more it costs. And of course, he's already said this, increased uncontrolled costs, inflation, fuel, insurance, et cetera. So I wanted to say that. Want to thank you for what you have done. And we've heard you, and we're really continuing to try to work to right the ship. So I asked him if I could say this because I think sometimes we forget, how did we get here? What did we do? I don't hardly remember what I did yesterday, but what did we do last year or the year before and the year before? And all the money that we received from the federal government was good to get, and now we no longer have it. So now we're going to have to tighten our belts and really try to really go very methodical and strategic in how we want to reduce the amount of the deficit. And at that, if there are no questions or comments from me, and I thank y'all for indulging me for saying that. I'm going to ask Ms. Brown, you ready?
I'm sorry, I have a comment.
Yes.
And I think Trustee Colton had a question or a comment.
I'm sorry. Okay.
My comment is I appreciate the overview, and that is great motivation to remember as we're making decisions for now. And I think about Dr. Smith, emotion trumps logic. As we get ready to make decisions, it can't be emotional because tomorrow is payday. And he told us, some of these things were coming. So it was just motivation for me as just one of 7 to keep that in mind, that the decisions that we're making right now with everything financial, to not allow emotions to trump logic, because the bottom line is taking care of the big picture. So thank you for that. Oh, Trustee Colton. Okay. Ms. Brown.
Good evening, Madam Vice President, Mrs. Fields, Board of Trustees. I'm pleased to give you an update from the human resources perspective and the budget. Let me go past this. Am I going the right way? There we go. All right, and so in the information that I'll share with you tonight, on last month, we're very thankful that you approved the compensation plan and equity adjustments. And this was a very early timeline for us as a district, and so that will do a couple of things. One, it will benefit us in being able to communicate with staff early on what they can anticipate for the upcoming school year. So we are aware that our staff members watch the news and they know what's going on around us, and so that sometimes gives people a sense of uneasiness, and so we really appreciate you for approving the compensation plan and those equity adjustments so that we can communicate with staff members earlier. We'll also be discussing the impact of some anticipated staffing reductions and what that will look like for us moving forward throughout the summer. Okay, and so one of the things that you requested at the last budget workshop was to see the number of students in the district added to this slide that was shared on last month. And so here you have in the red bar where we are with the adopted compensation for our teachers, beginning teachers at $58,500. And you see the student numbers and where those districts' starting pay is for teachers with 0 years of experience based on their population of students. So those to the left of us that have a starting pay lower than we do for the current school year, you can see their enrollment, and those who are to the right of us and their enrollment. So I want to make sure you have that. This aligns with the information that you have in that report that I gave you from TASB that has all districts in it, but this particular slide only gives you a view of those districts that we compare ourselves to for recruitment purposes. Okay. All right, and so when we talk about equity adjustments, I want to spend some time here speaking about the various pay groups that we have and what the impact would look like for particular individuals in that pay group, and then what it would look like overall for that pay group. And so when we look at our equity adjustments for teachers, and so sometimes we go back and forth as it relates to if it's a raise and not a raise. This is an equity adjustment. When we look at the equity adjustments for teachers, we have said to you for many years, we're not on a step schedule. You've heard me say we're not on a step schedule. Well, when we make this equity adjustments for teachers, it is treated very much like we're on a step schedule. And so that if I'm a teacher with 0 years experience this year in Duncanville ISD, my salary was $58,500. And next year, I would be a teacher with 1 year of experience. And so on our salary schedule for teachers, I apologize, let me hand this to Ms. Jody, if I may, right quick, because I did bring something in case you want to take a look. It's documents that you already have, but I wanted to bring another copy of the teacher salary schedule in case you wanted to refer to that. And so for 1 year of experience, a teacher would make $58,700. And so what that equity adjustment would look like is $200 total for the year for that teacher, right? And so we would be making equity adjustments related to that to any teacher impacted by that. It's important to remember if someone came to you and said, but I didn't get an equity adjustment, everybody won't get an equity adjustment. So if I am paid higher than our 30-plus teacher salary schedule, and then I don't qualify for an equity adjustment. And that will be true for every pay grade that we talk about. All right, so the teacher equity adjustments would cost us to the tune of $138,000. This does not include our bilingual teachers, certified bilingual teachers, and standard certified special ed self-contained teachers, because as we recall, they are on a different teacher hiring schedule for the next school year. So we'll take a look at them. So if we were looking at a bilingual standard certified teacher and their equity adjustment, we've added some additional information here so that you can see the impact that will have. We know that this is an area in which we found it very difficult to hire teachers, and we have a high need in this area. We often find ourselves needing a waiver and hiring ESL teachers, and so it is our hope that this plan will help us to be more attractive to bilingual certified teachers. So this year, if I was a bilingual teacher in Duncanville, I started at $58,500. In addition to that, we want to remember that they also receive a $7,000 sign-in bonus, but it's paid over 2 years, so they receive $3,500 of that, plus a $5,000 annual stipend. That is highly competitive in our area and beyond. With the new salary schedule that was adopted last month, that teacher now, for 1 year of experience, would move to $62,700 as their base salary, and they still would receive the other half of their sign-in bonus and their stipend. And so this is a huge marketing piece for us because our individuals who are here, we want them to stay, and then it's pushing that information out to the masses so that we can recruit additional bilingual certified teachers. So the equity adjustment for a bilingual certified teacher who has 1 year of experience, they would see a $4,200 equity adjustment in comparison to our previous slide. Okay. All right, and so for those bilingual certified, standard certified bilingual and self-contained special ed teachers, if we looked at the teachers who we have right now certified in our district, the impact would be approximately $308,000. Okay, and so when we talk about the total amount for the equity adjustment, you heard Mr. Garrison say earlier $1.8 million. These slides that we're going through, we're just adding that in, the equity adjustments by pay grade. All right, so when we look at our auxiliary employees, one of the reasons you'll notice that this won't be as high is because remember on last year, you voted to have a 15 or more, and so we saw a huge increase in our employees who were in our auxiliary, our administrative support, and our instructional support on last year. And so you won't see the equity adjustments be as high for this pay group, and that is why. So if we were looking at an equity adjustment for one of our auxiliary employees, and they are making $15 an hour now, so their annual salary is $31,200. They would move to $15.08 an hour with 1 year of experience, making their salary $31,366. So overall, the equity adjustment for this person would be $166.40. Everybody in that pay grade may not qualify for an equity adjustment, but for those who do qualify, it would cost the district about $77,000 to make those equity adjustments for our auxiliary employees. Those are our custodians, our maintenance workers, food and nutrition services, all of those individuals in those auxiliary pay grades. All right. So when we look at our AM pay grade, and it says staffing efficiency, but this is staffing equity example. We're looking at a manager. When we look at our AM pay grade, these individuals in that particular pay grade, or they may be a coordinator, or they may be a specialist, but they're not on the side with our administrative program where they have to have a specific certification in education to do their job. We're looking at a manager. This manager, you remember in our AM and AP pay grades, they have not received a raise in a couple of years, right? So remember on last year, there was no equity adjustment, there was no raise. So you will see our larger amounts impacted on these two pay grades. So this manager is currently at $53,571. To get an equity adjustment, that is, someone walks in the door with the same number of years experience as this person, they would receive $4,244 equity adjustment due to the fact that they have not received a raise in a couple of years. Okay, so that's the impact of that. And for the AM pay grade, it is a smaller group of individuals. And so in that AM pay grade, we're looking at about 52 people, just to give you a reference of what it looks like. And the amount there, I have the slide. I don't know what's going on, I'm sorry. Let me go to it so I can just tell you. It's $183,000. There we are. Okay. All right, let me hold my mouth just right. I want to make sense. All right, and so then the administrative professional pay grade. This is a large group of employees. This is our teacher pathway positions, and there are a lot of people in this this particular pay grade, but this includes our principals, our assistant principals, our counselors. It will include senior leadership team, anybody who is a coordinator, a director who has a certification to do their job. This is where we'll see the largest impact as it relates to equity adjustments. These individuals in this pay grade are paid at a higher rate because of the qualifications it takes for them to be able to do their job. So when we look at this example, we're looking at a coordinator. This coordinator, you have a hard copy, right? Oh, y'all can see, thank you. Y'all can see back there, so it's just me. All right, so the coordinator in this example, their salary is $81,135. They would receive an adjustment of $3,757, making their annual salary next year $84,892. There are individuals in this pay grade as well that would not qualify for an equity adjustment. In every pay grade, it is the same. But due to the fact that this is this pay grade is comprised of our highest paid employees, this is the biggest impact that we will see. And so the equity adjustments for our AP pay grade would cost us $1.32 million, over $1 million to provide equity adjustments in that particular pay grade. Let's see. Is it clicking right there? Okay, it switched. So when we look at our administrative support pay grade, these individuals are our clerical staff, our secretaries, our clerks. The example that I've given you here shows someone who's currently making $19.82 an hour. They would move to $19.93 an hour. This is another pay grade that you moved last year to 15 or more, and so they saw larger increases on last year. This employee would see an equity adjustment of $162 for the year. The total equity adjustments for our clerical staff would be around $24,000. Okay, all right, and then let's take a look at our instructional support. These individuals are our paraprofessionals, our instructional aides, bilingual aides that support the teaching and learning in the classrooms. An instructional aide that currently makes $16.50 an hour would move to $16.59 an hour and see an equity adjustment of $126. And so for the instructional support pay grade, which also last year you voted 15 or more, it would cost the district around $43,000 for those equity adjustments. Right? So when we look at every pay grade, that's all of the pay grades that we have, our administrative program, the AP, our administrative management, the AM, our instructional support, our clerical support, and our auxiliary staff members. That includes our police officers, everyone. It would cost us as a district to the tune of $1.8 million. That's if every single person that we have looked at for an equity adjustment stays in their position. So on the date that we looked at this is everybody who was planning to still be here for next year. This changes on a daily basis because if someone leaves, of course, they won't get an equity adjustment. If someone's coming in, they won't need an equity adjustment because they will be a new employee and their pay will be calculated as such. One of the things I want to highlight for you, because I know it's alarming, the $1 million it would be to anyone, is that in that particular pay grade, one of the things we have to consider is that we had to do those people person by person because you have to take their teaching years into account. That comes up all the time. If you have an assistant principal, they may talk about their pay and say, well, this person makes this amount and I make that amount. Well, this person has 15 years of teaching experience, you have 3. Right? So we may have the same number of overall years of experience, but I am receiving more compensation because I have more years of experience doing that job. So I've been an assistant principal for 15 years, although you taught for 15 years. So the only way for us to give real equity adjustments is to look at each person and say, if you have 5 years of teaching and 4 years of this is what you would be. So it's a case-by-case basis. And so it is important for us as an HR team that we look at it that closely and person by person because we want it to be right, for our staff members. Okay. All right. And so we know that would cost us, if everyone is still in their position next year, about $1.8 million. But Mrs. Fields has indicated that one of the things that we are looking at are those staffing reductions. I know I've shared the new staffing formulas with you. In addition, some of the positions that we have not filled due to the hiring freeze. But I wanted to show you a real example of how this looks, because one of the questions I would have is, okay, well, how much money are we going to save with these reductions? Well, that depends, because on one of the things that we're looking at are, we're getting these reductions through attrition. So it depends on who leaves, right? So a great example for us to look at, for example, is our counselors. In our new staffing formula, and you have a document in front of you that has a list by campus of potential reductions for campuses. We plan for 3 reductions on that list that you have. Those are, you'll see, are at our middle school level. Currently, we now have 6 vacancies. That has happened because since our last meeting, we've received some resignations, right? And so we will fill only 3 of the vacancies that we have, because on the document that you have in front of you, it says we are reducing our counselors by 3, right? So now we are able to say, okay, we're going to do some movement internally to fill those vacancies, and we'll only be hiring 3 externally, and to the tune of $223,000 that we will not spend. So Mr. Garrison talked about the fact that that number in payroll will continue to change. It will also change because of this, because we are counting for all of those people being here next year, but as they leave and they're on that document, that is money that we will be able to recoup, right? So, does that make sense? Okay. All right. And so we are keeping a running total of that. So we will be, every time something happens, we just add that and add the amount to it, right? And so we will be able to provide updates all along the way of what that looks like. Okay. All right. And so the potential savings of everything that you have on the document would be to the tune, if we got all of this through attrition, which we know we probably won't, right, would be to the tune of right over $2 million. Okay. All right. And so that is the update that I have for you this evening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Trustee Savage Martin?
Yes, on a couple of categories, there was, you noted that we gave them a minimum $15.
Yes, ma'am.
How would those areas be granted an equity adjustment?
It is much like it. I'm going to go back to a slide just so that I'm able to show. This one's a great example. So for a person who's on our administrative support pay grade, when we're hiring someone out in these particular pay grades, it's already built out by years of experience. So if you have 0 years of experience, this is how much you're going to make. And we have that built out all the way to 30 plus years of experience, right? So if someone, they've just finished their first year with us. So now they have 1 year. So if someone else was coming in now and they had 1 year, we would be putting them at $19.93. Without an equity adjustment, our current secretary would still be at $19.82. So basically, we do the same as we're doing on the teacher. It's like a step. Oh, if you have 1 year experience, this is what you make. If you have 2, this is what you make. So their equity adjustments seem a lot smaller because of the pay grade, 1, but just because it's basically getting them to the next step if you have 4 years of experience. Our employees in Duncanville are very used to receiving raises and generous raises, and so we haven't had to do as many equity adjustments in the past because they're always making above that based on the raise. But now, where we are as a district, equity adjustments will be the way we have to look at things until we're in a situation where we can do something different.
So it's based on years of experience for those employees here or a new one coming in?
Both, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions?
Any additional questions?
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, board. Any direction or feedback for us as we work to get us till June? We're still working. I'm just making a comment here that we're receiving resignations every day. And as people resign, we are taking a very hard look. Do we have to replace the individual? And that includes all the way from, of course, senior leadership all the way down. And so I will say that even as our team has worked together, we have had one budget meeting where Dr. Gorey did attend. It was virtual, just so that he hears the picture and knows hears where we are in our position. And so I've been trying to keep him abreast because the next board meeting, when you approve, he will be sitting here in this seat. And so do you want more information? Is there anything we can give you in the meantime between now and then?
I have one suggestion just for consideration. Some of those are like the equity adjustment and those things. As you work through those, could you guys create some FAQs for the website so that will
good idea.
answer some of those scenarios, because it's a little confusing, and I think it'll keep you from getting a ton of phone calls or frustration or mixed information if, as you are making those adjustments, to create the frequently asked questions. And I think people can click on those and figure out, oh, this is why.
Thank
So
you.
that's the only thing that came to my mind.
Great suggestion.
Trustee Colton?
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Garrison related to federal revenue. I know that, there is a projected budget revenue decrease, and I would like to have more details regarding that.
I think probably you want him to answer now. We can give you basically more specifics on that. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I was just wondering, there's by decrease.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to track it.
I can address
You
it.
wanna ask-
Oh,
The
page
two-
7.
Yes, I know exactly what they are. There was $2 million budgeted in a revenue line code that we collected no funds on. That was put in there that I don't, again, I don't want to sound like it's shifting, but I came in June and Dr. Bigby had actually put this together. And so that's a line code that I don't know, and I've reached out to him, excuse me. But there's no revenue collected in that line code. There's no revenue collected in that line code the previous year. So it's showing that we have a projection of $2 million to be collected, but none's been collected this year or next or the previous year. So that's why that's short. Now, what was anticipated, I can't answer that piece. Now, the SHARS piece is another piece that's affected nationwide. It's a federal reimbursement program for our medical needs students, and they changed their rules and regs mid-year on what's allowable. So what we were able to bill for and get reimbursed for in previous years was almost cut in half, and you'll hear that statewide. That's something that was a portion of it that was. One was $2 million, that was $1.5 million, and we've collected $515,000. I think we'll collect just a little bit more before the end of the year. But specifically, those are the two line codes that were in there for federal. One had 0 collections, the other one was cut in half.
So how are the lunch program, are those funded by federal funds?
There is a federal subsidy for those as well. There's a local component, but it's majority of it is federal. Now, that is a completely separate fund. So what we're talking about here specifically is just in our 199, our general fund. When we get ready to adopt the budget in June, there'll be a component that's a child nutrition fund that will actually show a federal reimbursement as well. A great question, but we get several sources of federal funds, but those are two completely separate ones. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then I have a question on page 8 related to payroll cost. Okay, and I understand, the pay equity adjustments. The other difference is what, 11.8? So 10 million?
So you're going to have about $5 million that was transferred previously from the other budget. There's $6.5 million in federal, 1.8 in equity adjustment, and then we back out $2.7 million that would have been from the benefits that were budgeted previously that are no longer going to be budgeted there.
Okay. So basically, those are hard, with the exception of the equity cost.
Yes, ma'am.
There's no increase.
Well, other than the 1.8,
Yeah.
the 6.5, so the $5 million that we're moving back up was transferred before, but you're correct. The only real increase to payroll at this time would be the equity adjustment of the 1.8, and the 6.5 we're moving in from another fund, so that does add to it. They were on the roll, but not in this budget, not in this fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Trustee Fahey?
In the two federal line items you mentioned, earlier you said something about two different IDAs or EFOs. What were
Yes.
they?
So when COVID first happened, and I'm going to turn to Dr. Brown, you guys get ECF funds or CFR? Okay, so I want to make certain, because we hadn't talked about it, but I've received it in another district and saw some of the line codes. So there was a program where you could get reimbursement for laptop purchases when COVID first happened. And that was one of the first things that happened before even the ESSER funds came into effect. And so that was my initial thought, because that would be a line code that would be used for that. And that also would make sense that it wasn't collected the last 2 years, because that was from previous years. And so it makes me feel like that maybe that got loaded there, anticipating that when that actually had closed out. And so it was a federal fund assisted to help go to remote learning at the onset of COVID.
What were the two different AEIOUs?
CFR.
What were they?
One was CFR, and the other one was ECF.
ETCF?
ECF.
ECF.
and
Now I know my AB.
Emergency
Probably need
Connectivity
the,
Fund.
The actual names instead of the,
Emergency Connectivity Fund,
thank you.
yes.
Yes, and I think you all will probably remember all the laptops and the wireless things that we installed and all of those. That was felt, and we no longer get it.
Any other questions or comments? Being that there is no further items to discuss, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Board.